very much, Travis. It's great to have you today.
Thanks, Lily. Good to be here.
So, I know that a lot of people will probably be interested to hear your experience in MySpace. So let's talk about it first.
Yes. So I ran the. How many of you remember MySpace? So there was a time when MySpace was the biggest site on the internet, and at that time I ran the international business for MySpace, and I launched MySpace in 30 different countries, and one of them was China, and a lot of interesting lessons going into China. We pioneered a new approach going into China when Mr. Murdoch, who had acquired MySpace, Rupert Murdoch, who acquired us, told us to go and figure out how to go into China. I did my research on U.S. companies going in there. My conclusion was we shouldn't go into China. There were lots of disaster stories. Lots of companies had invested a lot of money and lost a lot of money, and there were no success stories. But
Still the case, though?
and it's still, I think it's largely the case. So he said we want to go in. So we started a new model. We said, okay, let's not do what everyone else did. Let's create a separate company that's separate from MySpace. Let's raise local venture capital money. So I raised money from local VCs and get people who were locally influential on board. And that was very successful for getting us started. But at the end of the day, we still weren't. It still wasn't a success for a variety of reasons.
I enjoyed reading the article that you wrote about why Uber China selling to Didi is the best option that Uber has. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so as a lot of you know, Uber is one of probably the hottest startup out there right now. Just recently threw in the towel in China and sold their business to Didi, which is the dominant ride-sharing platform in China. And I think it was a smart move by Uber, and it's very symptomatic of what you see in everyone who's going into China to compete, which is they ran into the same things we ran into, that Google's run into, which is that as a non-Chinese company, it is very difficult to compete in China. It is not a level playing field. In fact, what you often find is that your local competitors can collude with the government against you and with other major players to make it almost impossible for you to succeed. And I think what we saw with Uber was just that. First of all, they were late to market, and they made a number of mistakes. So when they started, they didn't understand the markets. They were doing credit card-based payments, and most people in China don't have credit cards. They pay with things like WeChat. But they also ran into a lot of competitive issues where WeChat, which is the biggest payment provider, was an investor in Didi. And so Uber got blocked several times by WeChat, so WeChat would make it hard for people to pay. They would make good positive articles about Uber China disappear and negative ones flow freely through the network. And a lot of things sort of made competition difficult. And in the end, actually, right before the deal was announced, there was 7 ministries in China announced a new law that would A, legalize ride sharing, but B, make subsidies, sort of below cost subsidies, illegal in China. Uber was very heavily subsidized. As the incomer and the underdog, you tend to have to subsidize more, so it would have basically killed Uber's business anyway. A lot of people said it's a coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence. That was planned, and that people between the WeChat and Didi network and the government made sure that Uber had to find an exit. But I think at the end of the day, that had Uber got 20% of Didi, that's going to be worth a lot of money. And if you look at what happened with Alibaba and Yahoo, where their Alibaba stake became order of magnitude bigger than the core Yahoo business, I think it probably is a great move for Uber long term.
So that's one takeaway of your MySpace China experience. But you also talk about in mobile economy, China lead in that area. You talk about the super app like WeChat versus like the micro apps idea, which is defined everywhere in Valley. So can you talk a little bit more about that? And is that how that's the idea inspired you about your current business?
Yeah. So for those of you who work in Silicon Valley or do startups in the U.S. or invest, there's a common theme and wisdom around mobile, which is that all great apps do one thing really well. And a lot of people talk about the mobile economy as the great unbundling and going from these web portals to these micro apps that have very small functions. People point to Instagram as an example, talk about Facebook spinning Messenger out of the core Facebook app as another example. We don't agree with that thesis at all. And I think if you look at what's happening in China, I spent a lot of time looking at China and in Asia in general, and Asia tends to be about a full generation ahead of the US in terms of mobile adoption. That's partially due to faster mobile broadband speeds and also inferior sort of wired internet speeds that are slower, that pushed everyone to mobile. So people have adopted mobile, have gone mobile only in much greater numbers in Asia and in China, and so you can learn a lot from what's happening there. And when you look at the mobile story in China, it's not a perfect analogy, but the story is much less, the big winners are less micro apps and sort of very small things, and instead you're starting to see the rise of what we refer to as super apps. So you can take, for example, WeChat, which is a messenger and a photo sharing thing, but it's also your wallet, and it's also a commerce platform that you can use to go shopping or to order movie tickets or to book a restaurant. All those things happen in a single app. It's the exact opposite of the sort of typical Silicon Valley wisdom. And what we really see is the competition is becoming about who's going to be the one must-have app on sort of the start screen of your phone, and anything off the first screen tends to be forgotten. We see this also, I'm in the travel space, my current company is in the travel space, and we see this in travel as well in China. So Ctrip is one of the biggest players, but they do flight booking and hotel booking and train booking and bus booking, and you can order a taxi, you have city guides, and you can read hotel reviews and restaurant reviews. So it states in the US you would have 6 or 8 different apps that are building that. So when we started building my current company, which is called Gogobot, if you don't have it, you can download it now on your phone. You'll enjoy it. So the idea of Gogobot was really we looked at the travel experience, particularly in the mobile space, and felt like it was incredibly fragmented. That people were literally, if you're booking a trip, you might use one app for flights and another one to book hotels, but you're using another one to read hotel reviews and another one to look on the map to see where is that hotel located, and then when you get there, you're looking on another app for restaurants. It's exhausting just saying that, but actually doing it as a consumer is a terrible experience. You want to have everything sort of tied together in a way that it's simple, it's easy to access, and sort of knows what you're doing. And so we built the app, my app Gogobot, around this concept of how do you serve the full travel life cycle of the traveler, and take a lot of lessons from what we're seeing in Asia about where apps are going to be 5 years from now as opposed to where they're at today. And I'd actually point to the Facebook Messenger. People say this is an example of unbundling, but that's not the strategy of Facebook at all. They are looking at Messenger as a platform similar to WeChat. They hired David Marcus, who ran PayPal, to be the head of Messenger with a clear nod towards visions for payments. They're adding sort of chatbots and other services, and they really believe in this model, the super app as well, which is all coming out of China and out of Asia.
How do you see yourself compete with companies Ctrip or TreeDot or Google Travel?
Yeah, so one of the differences that we built in our app Gogobot, so we built artificial intelligence into our app so that it's context aware. So if you think of a traditional travel app, you tend to get sort of a generic top 10 list. Here's the top 10 things to do, the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre, and here's the same generic list of hotels. What we're seeing in the marketplace is that consumers increasingly expect services to be personalized to them, to be smart, and particularly in the mobile device. Your mobile device knows who you are, it knows where you're standing, it sort of knows history of the things that you do, and so you ought to be able to be smarter than that. What we've built with Gogobot is an app that's context aware, so when you open it up, it knows where you are, it knows what time of day it is, it knows what the weather is. So if you land in Hawaii and you open up and it's raining, it's going to say, it's not going to tell you should go to the beach today, it's going to actually recommend indoor activities because it knows what the weather is. It knows what's nearby, and if you're going to grab a cup of coffee, it knows in New York you're probably not going to want to go more than 4 blocks for a cup of coffee, where if you're in Montana, you probably have a car and going a couple miles might be okay. We know what people search for at different times of day, and so we can be predictive. The whole idea that people don't like typing and hunting and pecking on their phone, and so there's enough data that we ought to be able to predict what you are interested in and start to recommend that. The only other people who are doing this today in travel is Google, who they've been experimenting with this with Google Now, and they just recently, last week, launched a new travel app that's doing a lot of the same things that we're working on with Gogobot. But most of the industry is still very much, in the Web 1.0 way of thinking, which is everybody sees the same content in the same order at the same time, which isn't really what consumers are looking for. At least that's how we see the world.
So my last question is for, I want to ask you, what's your experience like working with your boss in MySpace, Wendy Murdoch and Rupert Murdoch?
So, that's a funny question. So, Wendy Murdoch, so a lot of Wendy Ding Murdoch was Rupert Murdoch's wife, who I think became most famous for doing a sort of flying leap and smacking down a protester who was going to hit Rupert with a pie and who was testifying before Parliament over the phone hacking scandal. But Wendy was on the board of MySpace China, and she's a Chinese national. She actually grew up in a very poor village in China and went from that to being the wife of one of the biggest billionaires in the world, and now is reportedly dating Vladimir Putin.
You like that part.
I can't confirm it's true. It was actually really helpful having Wendy on the board of the company. So Wendy didn't, she hadn't run big businesses. She didn't come from the internet, but what she did have was very deep connections in China. And to be successful in China, it's not just about building a great product. It's not just about marketing a great product. You actually have to know how the system works. You have to know who's in charge of different things. And Wendy was really helpful. She helped us, as we were selecting investors. Some of the investors we selected, from my standpoint and going and meeting with them, they didn't seem like the obvious best choice. And Wendy said, believe me, these are the right guys to go with. And they ended up being really helpful for...
Share the names.
I probably ought not. IDC was one of the companies that we worked with. And CBC. So what we found was, for things like getting a license to operate, so we actually got our license to operate in internet service in China before Google did, even though Google started 8 years before us. And part of it was we figured out how to work through the system where Google was going through the official process. And we had a lot of times where you actually need to have those connections. So for example, one time, when we started off MySpace, we had our servers locally in the US and had to get through the firewall of China to work, which is a recipe for disaster anyway. We didn't keep that very long. But what that means is that your service can be shut off at any time by the government. And one time our local office called and they said, our service has been blocked, MySpace is down. And we're like, why is MySpace down? So we had to go through Wendy, through our investors, to sort of call around to the government. And what it turned out was that the Premier of China at the time was going to do a state visit in London, and the Times of London had written an article which some people in the government felt wasn't a flattering portrait of the Premier, and they figured out the Times of London was owned by News International, which was owned by News Corporation, Rupert's company, which owned Fox Interactive Media, which owned MySpace. And so in retaliation for this article that some journalists wrote, they blocked our site. So we had to go through and explain, look, it's maybe different in the US, but we don't have any control over what a journalist writes in the UK. Even Rupert Murdoch doesn't really have control over what individual journalists choose to publish. And it's not fair. They eventually got us unblocked. But had we not had those connections, which I think we can thank Wendy a lot for, we could have been blocked for weeks. And we actually talked to some of the early Google guys there. They had told a story about how at one point they were sort of battling it out with Baidu at the time, and the guys from Baidu went to the regulators and printed out a stack of papers with searches that you could do on Google that led to stuff that regulators in China wouldn't want people seeing. And not only did Google get blocked for a month, but if you tried to type google.cn into your browser, it would automatically redirect you to Biden. And I think that was for me the big eye-opener, like, wow, it's actually really tough to compete in this market because they're not going to do that for a Western company. If you have those connections, it can be really helpful. And so if you're going into China, I recommend you have to have people who are local to China and who know what they're doing and who have those connections and who can help you, because there is so much relationship. Relationship is very important, and but the cards are stacked against you if you're not a local Chinese company.
Do you think it's easier now?
I don't know. I would argue, based on what the story and what we saw with Uber, probably not. I mean, obviously China is opening up slowly, and I think the idea of a more open market is the direction that China is heading, but I don't think we're there yet. And I think the government of China the country is very well run in many ways, and they have a very strong interest in seeing the local companies succeed. And there's also tremendous talent in China that are building great companies anyway, and so it's a tough proposition.
Yeah, I still think we haven't seen very many successes of U.S. companies in China. It's still a huge challenge, and I don't think it's getting any easier. That's my own opinion. But anyone out there in the audience disagree with that? Okay. Well, let's give Lilly and Travis a round of applause.